This is Kenny Litvak, Marketing Manager for Princeton Pro Musica. On Sunday, May 18th at 4 p.m. in Richardson Auditorium on the campus of Princeton University, Princeton Pro Musica will perform James McCarthy's Codebreaker, the ALAN Turing Story, for chorus, orchestra, and soprano soloist. I recently sat down with artistic director Ryan Brandau as he offered reflections on this captivating piece of music that the composer himself calls a portrait of a living, breathing human being. If you haven't already, please visit princetonpromusica.org for tickets, and please enjoy these insightful thoughts in advance of a concert you won't want to miss.
To me, any time that 100 singers and an entire symphony orchestra combine forces to make music, the sheer level of cooperation that shows, more people than any sports team, probably more than the cast of a musical, certainly, and maybe all but the biggest operas, that wields a certain power, a heft, and an import. For a lot of music history, composers were hired to deploy that power to maybe reflect or evoke the power of God, or sometimes not so subtly the ruler who was paying the commission. We have a lot of masses and cantatas written to celebrate birthdays, for instance, or commemorate the passing of nobles, aristocrats, and so on. Other great works were written simply because their composers were inspired and had to put pen to paper, something like Brahms' Requiem. Those will always be a part of the Princeton Pro Musica repertoire. We love and lift up that music. And in some ways, it is our bread and butter. It's great. Haydn's creation, reveling in the beauty of God's earth, Handel's Solomon, heralding that ruler's wisdom, and so on. As for biographical works, a couple of years ago we did St. John Passion, which is a work that chronicles the detention and conviction and death of an outspoken outsider. But in these last couple of seasons, we've also tried to turn to works that are recently written that take for their subjects and for their inspiration real people, people we would now call historical figures because of the impact they made in the world. People who aren't supernatural, aren't supreme rulers, but nevertheless managed to do something superhuman and leave an enormous impact on the world. And in this case, Codebreaker by James McCarthy focuses on the life of Alan Turing, who in the 1940s was able to crack the code of the Germans and help turn the tide of World War II. And his work as a mathematician and as a founder of computer science has led us to the extraordinary world we live in today, which is enriched, let's say, by computers. Well, I think there's no denying the fact that computers are a fully integrated part of so many of our lives, for better or worse. And Turing's work, both as a PhD student in Princeton, and then after that in Bletchley Park, working on codes and building machines that could compute faster than humans could, led us in part to the world that we are in today. But that aside, I think that there is a sense that history, even though at least when I was growing up, we were made to memorize facts and figures and people, um, is not just that, but much more four-dimensional, and that those who um, make it into history by whatever deeds or actions are, of course, multidimensional and human beings themselves, that none of us exist perfectly sealed off from our communities or our cultures or our countries. Turing was doing extraordinary things, but the laws of his country deemed one aspect of his self to be criminal and punishable. And all the mathematical and computational feats in the world couldn't change that. And to me, that is something that emerges when we focus on these important historical figures, is that just a part of humanity, I fear, and a part of history is that those in power, those trying to control the narrative, um, will always have their scapegoats and those who some part of them maybe doesn't fit the prevailing culture. So even those who achieve extraordinary things can succumb to the most ordinary of circumstances, and that we want to learn from that and learn how to move beyond. The heart of the work captures the moment in World War II where Turing and his colleagues at Bletchley Park were fast at work at an absolutely breakneck pace, that he was able to create a machine that could ingest and help crack the code of the Germans on a daily basis. And so the morning was a very intense time for them to get going. And there are a lot of moments in the music where the orchestration moves at that breakneck pace, and all of those instruments that can so easily, rapidly rearticulate notes do so. And there are even moments for the chorus where they have to work at a very quick pace. And I think it captures something um, about the particular bandwidth or speed at which Turing's mind was able to operate, that were drawn into that fast-paced world. Of course, there are other moments then that reflect on the other side of his falling in love, his dealing with grief, and there, by contrast, there are extended passages for a cappella chorus, which of course is a very human sound, a very different sound from rapid-fire instruments. And furthermore, beyond the use of the orchestra in the chorus, I think one thing that's extraordinary about this work is its libretto. The composer is also the librettist. And for the obvious reasons, Turing couldn't write a lot about his love life and leave behind a lot of letters and writing. But he does include a few letters that Turing wrote to the mother of the boy that he fell in love with at school, and the words of his own mother, and the words that he wrote on a postcard. But otherwise, McCarthy turns to poets to fill in those gaps and help us reflect on the bigger, again, more four-dimensional aspect of Turing as a human being. So we hear the words of Sarah Teasdale, Wilfred Owen, Oscar Wilde, and Robert Burns, and it's a beautiful collage, a very poignant collage of poetry that McCarthy's put together. Is there one thing we can take away? How do I put this? So-called historical figures are deemed such because they do great things. They change the world, but they also eat breakfast. They tie their shoes. They fall in love, and they have their hearts broken. And I'm reminded in these stories that it can be difficult to know in the course of your own lifetime what you might accomplish that is in fact great, as deemed by yourself, those closest to you, or indeed the entire world. And the way that Codebreaker works, it reminds us that a single person who is in no small way responsible for the astonishing power of computers, which are a huge part of our lives, and in no small way responsible for turning the tide of World War II, also had a great love and a tragically short life. And that we all have the potential for greatness in our own ways. But that one of the greatest things we can do is to hold a tender and open spot in our hearts for the humanness of everyone in our communities, for each and every one of us.